Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. I'm Sherry Zievenbergen. You were born, you're gonna die, and your adventure is your dash in between. So make the most of it. Unlock your potential in all aspects of your dash by embracing your uniqueness and living in a way that's authentic to you, not by doing more things, but by focusing on the right things. I'm a former corporate leader turned coach who's on my own journey, and I'm passionate about helping you on your journey too. So on the podcast, we'll explore how to live authentically by deciphering who you truly are and what you truly want. Are you ready to take a step toward designing your dash? Someday doesn't actually exist, so let's do it now. Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. Today, I'm excited to have my friend Eric Recker here with us today. And I'm going to tell a little bit about Eric, but I'm going to let him take it from there and share all his amazingness with you. Eric is a dentist, a success coach, a keynote speaker, a workshop facilitator on performance and burnout, an author, and a recovering triathlete. So when we talk about climbing mountains, Eric has actually done that on numerous occasions. And I think on some occasions you actually paid to do so. Is that right, Eric? Someone would have to pay me in most cases. So I met Eric recently at his own event, Win the Now. And I didn't know anything about you prior to that, Eric. I just saw that my friends, Lisa Even and Don Ely, were going to be speaking at an event. And I thought, with Eric Recker, who is this Eric Recker dude? I need to meet him. If he's, friends with Lisa and Don, I need in on this. And then the more I read about you, I thought, okay, I'm absolutely going to be attending this Win the Now event. So that's a little bit about Eric. Eric, thank you so much for being here. I also want to say, Wi-Fi hates me, so this is going to probably be a mini series of sorts. But so you won't get enough of Eric today, folks. But I'll have him back, and he'll share all the things, all the places where you can follow him too. So, Eric, now I will let you speak. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself, about your book, your journey, wherever you want to take this from here, Eric.
Sounds perfect, Sherry. I'll just give the shortened version. It'll be about 6 hours, and we'll just jump back in then. No, I won't do that to everybody. But yeah, the Win the Now event was so fun. And what I'm learning in life is that connections are so important. It's the people that we get to share life with, the people that we get to be around. And somebody introduced me to Lisa, and then somebody introduced me to Dawn. And because I got introduced to those people, then I got to meet you, Sherry, and your energy is palpable, and you're just a fun person to be around. So one of the best parts about my journey is that I just get to meet amazing people and do life with them. So I'm super blessed to do that. I am a dentist. That's my day job. At this point, I see patients in my dental practice 3 days a week. And I coach and speak and create content, write books and stuff like that on the other 2 to sometimes 4 days a week. As you know, Sherry, there's really no boundaries for some of the work that we do. And so I'm at this point right now where I'm able to share my journey of burnout with other people, because several years ago, I was dangerously close to selling my dental practice and walking away. Burnout had such a hold on me that I felt that the only way out was to walk away from dentistry. So we actually had some plans in place. I was going to sell it to one of the associate dentists that worked for me. And then through a series of unfortunate events and a horrific car accident, that was not able to happen. So I had to step back and decide what I really wanted with life. And what I realized is that by trying to get away from dentistry, all I was doing is trying to go around my problems. And the truth was that I needed to go through that burnout. I needed to figure out a way through it, because I could have escaped and I would have gotten burned out on whatever else I did. So I'm in a place right now where I've learned a lot of lessons, and my hope is that I will be able to impact other people in what I would consider the second half of my life.
And you are already impacting people 100%. I mean, just the impact you had on me that day, and then from there, just learning more about you is so impactful. I did not realize you were so close, Eric, to selling your dental practice.
Yeah, that's something that I really felt bad talking about it for a while because I felt really guilty about it. I just thought it's amazing when we do something, especially when we do something for a long time. I've been a dentist for 22 years. And so to most people, that is my identity. My identity is being a dentist. That's what I do. And a lot of people really struggle with understanding why I would want to do other things. Well, aren't you a dentist? Yeah, I'm a dentist, but I have a message inside me that at some point when I'm on my deathbed, I am going to regret if I did not give this a great try to try to get this message out into the world. But burnout had such a hold on me. I had all the stuff. So it started out with just stress that wouldn't leave me alone. I had trouble sleeping. Lots of us I know struggle with that. It got to a point where I loathed Mondays. It would start even on Saturday nights, sometimes on Sundays, and I would just know it'd be that feeling of impending doom. As it kept going, I just thought this is what people had. This is what people went through. This is what business owners had. This is what dentists had, this stress that just follows you around. That's just part of the gig. And so I struggled with that, but then it got worse. I started having chest pains. When stress would ramp up, my chest would feel tight. I started having heart palpitations. So my heart would race or slow down or lots of different stuff. And then as I continued to push forward, and I always thought that the answer was adding more. I had to work harder. I had to try harder to sleep. I had to add different activities and events and stuff like that. And then I started getting panic attacks. And panic attacks are beyond horrific. And I wouldn't wish those on anyone, but they were all warning signs that, hey, Eric, something's not right and you need to address this. And so my way of addressing it was just putting my foot down and doing more and doing harder. And eventually that came to a head.
And you just had in your head, oh, I just need to try harder to fix this, right? And the result is generally adding more stuff to our schedules.
Exactly. So I tell people at one of the peak times, I've had at least 3 seasons of significant burnout. One of those seasons, I found myself buying my dental practice from my father, building a new dental practice that was easily twice the size of the one that we were in, and that was all on me. I was coaching both of my kids in soccer. I was on 5 different boards, and I was training for 2 Ironman triathlons. And when I tell people
2, I just want to stop you there. 2.
Yeah, that's a funny story. That's a funny story. Be careful the promises you keep to people. So I had a good buddy who lived in town, and he said, hey, man, I think we'd done half Ironman triathlons before. And he said, I think I'm ready for the Ironman distance. And he said, let's find one to sign up for. I said, okay, well, let's sign up for the one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, because I want to do one that is just beautiful and scenery and all that kind of stuff. I want to experience all of that. He said, yeah, absolutely. So I was starting to train and ramp up for it, and you sign up for these things a year in advance. And that date came, and I said, hey, are you in? And radio silence. So I was thinking, I am ramping this up. I am not going to waste this training. So I found a different race to do in October of that year. So that'd be 8 months before the Coeur d'Alene one. Said I'm not going to go out to Coeur d'Alene by myself. So I ended up signing up for one in Wilmington, North Carolina. Well, about 2 days after I signed up for it, he messaged me and sent me a picture of his registration for Coeur d'Alene. So I was in a bit of a sticky wicket, as they might call it. And I ended up signing up for the other one. So, yeah. And when I tell people this story, they're like, well, duh, that's way too much. And I said, yeah, but it didn't start with all of that.
Right.
It was the frog in the boiling water, right? I was put into the pot and I didn't notice the temperature getting turned up. And oh, by the way, if they don't have coaches for soccer, they're going to start canceling some of the teams. And oh, by the way, this board and this board and this board. And I just wasn't very good at saying no at that time. So I ended up with enough, probably I had enough for 3 people easily on my plate.
Absolutely. And you're a dad and a husband besides all of that.
Yeah. And during that season, you can probably imagine I was not as good of a dad and husband as I could be.
What I love I love a lot of things about your book, but one thing I love about your book, you make the point that it doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like you said, it's like the frog in the boiling water. It just happens so slowly that you don't even recognize it's happening until you reach that point of burnout. And then I know I've been there and I thought, well, this is just being an adult. This is just what adulthood looks like. This is just part of it. And it's just such a sad thought process to have, because clearly it's not the life most people want to have. It's not the life you and I certainly wanted to have, but you just you justify it and you overlook those things and you think, well, if I just add one more thing, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe this is going to be the thing, right?
For sure. So Sherry, if you don't mind me asking, what did your burnout journey look like?
I really loved a lot of things about the corporate environment that I was in. But I went into accounting and finance because I was good at math and I was organized. And so clearly accounting was the route to go. And I just always found myself climbing the next mountain thinking, oh, now I just need to do this. Now I need to get another certification. Now I need to, work on a bigger project. So I wasn't literally climbing mountains like you were, but I was just always on to the next thing. I mean, when I graduated, I got my CPA license, and then I went into internal audit after a couple of years, and then I got my CIA certification. Just, nobody really cares about all of those letters behind my name. There are some I kind of struggle to think, okay, what do those stand for? But it was just, I did not until later in life really stop and ask myself, what am I trying to achieve here? What's my ultimate goal? Because as soon as I would accomplish one thing, I was on to the next thing. And that's something I know you talk about in your book too, right? There's really no end in sight. And we don't necessarily stop and ask ourselves, what's the ultimate goal here? Because it just never ends.
Yeah, you're so true. And the reason I asked about that is because I know there are going to be people listening here who can relate to at least one of our burnout stories and believing, well, I didn't think anything I was going through was abnormal. I just thought this is what people went through. And I hear it over and over again. For me, a big part of it was I just hit the ground running. When I got out of dental school, my dad's practice was not big enough to support me, but he knew it had the potential to be. So when he hired me, he bought another practice from a dentist who was retiring, and we moved into that building. So I had an instant full practice. So a lot of people, when they start whatever their profession is, there's a little bit of a ramp up period. I didn't have a ramp up period. It was a starting gun and I was off to the races. So my schedule was booked 6 weeks from day one when I was there.
Oh, wow.
And so that's just the only way that I had ever known to do it. And I think one of the dangers, and I'm learning this more and more all the time, is that we as a society think that the answer is more. So for me, I have a bullying story, and we could certainly get into that. But one of the things I was told on the recess kickball playground when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade is that I wasn't good enough. So I wasn't allowed to play. It wasn't that I was picked last. It was that I wasn't allowed to play. And it's super ironic. People say this all the time. There's no way. You are one of the most athletic people I know. Yeah, now I am. But back then, I was one of the youngest people in my class, and I was in that awkward kind of husky phase. And I wasn't a great athlete. And so I probably wasn't good enough, but who are you punks to judge that I can't play a game of recess kickball? Right? You little punk.
Right.
So I made a pact with myself when I was in third grade on the side of that recess kickball field. And I said, I am going to be so good at everything I ever do that no one is ever not going to pick me. And I had no idea the power of those words. In fact, I forgot that I had said that until probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember, and it just came back to me so clearly one day, all of that. And I thought, oh boy, that explains why when I started running, a 5K wasn't good enough. And then a 10K and a half marathon and a marathon, sprint triathlon, Olympic distance, half Ironman. I actually, after I did my second Ironman, I spent a week researching double and triple Ironman races.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't either until I started looking at it. And my wife said, you have got to get a hold of yourself. Like, that's like a 3-day race. How are you going to do that? And how are we ever going to see you in the midst of all of that? So as I looked at all of that stuff, and I think we think that the answer is more. So if something's wrong, we add a pill, or we feel like we're missing something, so we buy something online, or we add a membership, or we add a subscription, or we add this, and we end up with this list of commitments that is ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Right? We end up with this list that no one can possibly sustain meaningfully. And what I found, and when I coach people on this, is that I don't think the answer is usually in more. I think the answer is actually in a focused less. So what can we take away from our lives that is draining our energy or sucking or causing us to have unnecessary outflow? And once that's gone, what can we do with that time to actually take care of ourselves? So to me, that has just been life-changing.
So one thing I really appreciated in your book was that you talked about, even though you are coaching other people about the fact that they're adding more and they really need to consider not doing that, you yourself still struggle with that. Right, Eric?
I sure do. I have to be so intentional with what I say yes to. So intentional. And fortunately, I have a wife who is one of the most gracious people on the planet. She would have had ample reason to leave me multiple times through all of this, but she is just so dang supportive. But we've gotten to the point where we really have to be super honest with ourselves when when I'm going to add something, because I have an addictive personality.
Mm-hmm.
I do. If I start doing something, I am probably going to do it more than most people, go in on it more than most people would. And now I know that about myself. So I'm starting to count the cost of any new thing that I do. But even then, for a perfect example, and I'm not proud of this, but I was asked to serve on consistory at my church. And that's a worthwhile thing to do. It's a great thing to do. And so I said yes to it. And it's a 5-year commitment. And after the first couple of meetings, I realized 2 things. One, I'm not serving out of my strengths in this. This is not using my strengths. It's really not. And 2, I don't have bandwidth for this. So this is not my best yes. Not even close. And it is not fair to my church, and it is not fair to the people that we're trying to serve for me to be there when I am not fully there. So it was really hard, but I had to have a tough conversation and say, I am sorry that I said yes to this, but I have to say no to this because I cannot do the job that this job needs at this point for me right now. It was hard to do, and I had a choice. My choice was that I could either stay in that, resent it because of the amount of time it was taking, and also realize that I wasn't working out of my strengths, or I could just gut it out and get bitter about it and get frustrated. In the end, the pain of change was less than the pain of staying the same. So I got the courage up. I had that conversation, and instantly it felt like a massive weight was lifted off me. So I think sometimes we need to take a look at some of those commitments that we have and say, is this my sweet spot? Is this something, and I have a paradigm that we go through this, but really just asking, is this my best yes for this season of life?
And is it in the best interest of the people you're attempting to help? Because it wasn't in their best interest either. If you stayed on board, powered through, you weren't utilizing your strengths to the degree you wanted or should to benefit them. And you were going to be building resentment at the same time.
Right. And all of that just ends up draining us. And once we start to understand this concept, the concept in the book of us as a dam, then we start to realize, man, I only have so much capacity. And yes, the people who are listening to this podcast are going to be high capacity people. They're going to be high achievers. There's no doubt about it. This is not going to be a podcast that people with no ambition are going to listen to. It just, you know that, Sherry. But when we do that, we have to realize we have finite outflow. And unless we are unbelievable at making sure that we are filled up all the time, then we have to pay really close attention to what we're doing with our time and with our energy.
So I want you to talk more specifically about the dam and the analogy itself in your book. One thing I want to mention first. Okay, this sounds really egotistical, but I think you'll relate. It's always been easy for me to see, this just sounds terrible, but I've always been able to see the limitations of other people and think, it's clear that a human couldn't do all those things that other human is doing. However, I felt like I should be able to do more. I should be able to do all of the things.
Yep.
Is that kind of how you felt too, Eric?
Oh, man. I hear this story over and over. I was actually giving a presentation on Wednesday, and we did a lot of really fantastic small group breakouts. And one of the things that I challenged people to is, would you even dream of asking someone else to do what you ask of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Would you even dream of it? Because why is it okay that, and I like to use the image of, I've been to Haiti several times on mission trips. I was on a board for a group called Many Hands, and we would go down to Haiti. And one of the things that I would see is the donkeys in Haiti, how much they could carry. It was amazing, whether it was sugar cane or whether it was rum or whatever it was that they were carrying. There's a reason that they're called a beast of burden, because they just work and they just carry these massive weights on the side as they're going down the road. And one time I saw a donkey that was collapsed on the side of the road.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, man, what a picture of us.
Yeah.
We load ourselves and load ourselves and load ourselves like crazy. At what point are we going to give out? And we might not give out, we might not die on the side of the road like what happened to that donkey. But are we going to live a life that has any meaning? Or are we just going to end up being a shell of our former self? because we just keep adding and adding and adding. We would never ask someone else to do all that, but we're getting crushed under the burden. And some point we have to pay for that burden. We just have to. Is that debt that's due for me, what came forth in chest pain, heart palpitations, panic attacks. Maybe it's sickness. Maybe it's a diagnosis. Maybe it's you make a really bad decision at work because you just have too many things on your plate. At some point, we are going to pay for being overcommitted. So this is just one of those things that we need to address at some point in our lives, or else we're going to find ourselves in this space.
I really, as terrible as that vision of the donkey is, I think it is just so relevant and just such a great visual, because we each choice that we make and each thing we add in itself seems logical. It seems like, oh, well, this is just one more, just this in itself is no big deal. I can do this. And it seems reasonable to do it, and it's going to benefit someone, and it aligns with my values and all the things. But similar to the donkey, I mean, you could just add one more thing to the donkey's back, and then eventually it's going to collapse. And you don't know where that point is.
Yes.
Until you collapse.
Yes. And we don't know that at all. One example that I use of this, I've been blessed to be able to do some really great traveling. I went to India in 2006 with a group called Mission India. And basically the trip was for prospective donors. We had been giving some money to Mission India, and this was a way for us to see what kind of work they actually do in country, and that we could go and encourage some of their missionaries and help strengthen them. Well, I had been running at a frenetic pace leading up to that. And this was a 2-week trip, and I was 2 weeks away with two really young kids and my wife back home in January. And so we went, and I started early on in the trip. I didn't feel well. I usually am one of the healthiest people around, but I did not feel well, and started having some of that traveler stuff that you can have when you go to foreign countries. And so, but I kept going. I kept the pace up. I tried to do some things to feel better. And anyway, I got back and I started to feel a little bit better, but I just wasn't great. And I called my friend who does some travel medicine, and he got me on some antibiotics, some crazy powerful antibiotics. And I kind of felt like I was turning the corner, but I was still pushing, just doing so many things. And then I had a day where I woke up and I thought, boy, I feel as good as I can't have in probably a month. This is amazing. And I went through my morning of work and everything was okay. And my office, I had my personal office upstairs and our practice was on the main floor. I felt 100% at the top of the steps. By the time I got to the bottom step, I knew that I needed to go to the hospital immediately.
Oh, wow.
That's how fast it hit. So I drove myself to the hospital 4 blocks away from our practice. By the time I got there, I crawled into the ER. Long story short, I ended up being about 5 minutes away from getting a full colostomy.
Oh my gosh.
So I had, yes, and it would have been irreversible. So it would have been, it was one of those line in the sand moments. I had a condition, I didn't even know what it was called. I'd never heard of it, called toxic megacolon. And it is fatal in 10 to 15% of cases. So what had happened is I had caught E. coli when I was in India, and I was healthy enough that my body could fight it off until it couldn't anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so this is why I say that at some point when we are burdened and overloaded and all of this stuff, there is a point that you have to pay for it. And yet still, I was in the hospital for 2 days, and I was for Thursday and Friday, and I was back to work on Monday and back to pushing and cranking and everything because I still didn't learn that lesson. And this is one of the biggest reasons that I want to get the opportunity to talk to people, because these are the things that happen when we don't take care of ourselves.
And I could absolutely relate, just thinking, well, okay, I'm better now. I need to go back to work on Monday. I'm fine, right? I'm fixed. Yeah,
Yep.
Nothing shocking about that. But you would never suggest to someone else that they do the same thing, right, Eric?
No, I'd say you probably better give yourself at least 2 to 3 extra days to make sure you're okay. Maybe even a week. Just get really well before you come back. But that's another part of my MO. The crazy thing is that in 22 years of dental practice, I have missed 2 days of work, and it was those 2 days that I was in the hospital.
Eric, that is insane. It's so easy for me to tell you. That's insane.
It is. It is insane. And again, I think it's all part of the journey for trying to understand that. And now I really haven't had a day probably in the last 10 years that I've even been tempted to stay home from work. There's days I haven't felt great, but I felt good enough to go to work. So it's not like a source of pride or anything like that. I'm blessed to be super healthy. I really focus on taking care of myself, and I'm blessed to be super healthy. So I haven't had to do that. So it's not like a bragging thing or anything, but for most of my career, it really has been can't take the foot off the gas, no brakes, gotta go.
To the point that you burned out and wrote a book about it, which we have not. Okay, I know that we have about 2 minutes left. We haven't even gotten to your book. We haven't gotten to the Win the Now event. So much yet to cover. But because I know you have a hard stop today, I want to just ask you a couple questions and then know that you're going to be back, which you told me prior to us starting to record. So I'm not just being totally presumptuous here.
Sounds great.
Okay, so tell me, Eric, what would the current version of yourself tell the younger version of yourself if you had an opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's so important. We all need to address this, but it would be from day one, take care of yourself. Take care. We say it all the time. When we leave, we say to somebody, take care. We say that all the time. We don't even think about it when we say it. But seriously, we have got to incorporate ways in our day that we take care of ourselves. We have to. It's non-negotiable. And if I would have done a better job taking care of myself early on, then I would have been able to weather some of the storms. So we got to find ways, big and small, to take care of ourselves.
And not just take care of yourself to the point where you can get by or power through, but actually feel good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to. I talk about, I have 3 ways that we really gauge kind of where we're at. One is just a 1 to 10 scale, from 1 is empty and 10 is full. Another one is a gas gauge, empty to full. And another one is the concept of a body battery, which I talk about in the book that I got from my smartwatch. But ultimately, 5 or right in the middle is not enough. We need to find ways to get ourselves back in that 6, 7, 8, 9 range, so that we have something in the tank so we can bless our people. So important. If we want to make an impact in the world, and I think everyone who's listening to this does want to make an impact in the world, we have to have something in the tank, or else we are going to be useless to everyone else.
And oftentimes we find we think it's selfish if we focus on taking care of ourselves, but it's actually not at all, because we can't, like you said, we can't serve anyone else if we're not taking care of ourselves either.
we have to be selfish so that we can be selfless. It's a tough concept for people, but we have to be, it's non-negotiable. We have to be a little bit selfish so that we can be selfless. If you got nothing in the tank, how good of a parent are you going to be? How good of a team member are you going to be? How good of a coach or a speaker are you going to be if you don't have anything to give yourself? It's an equation that I can't get away. When I was burned out, the equation was overcommitted and not taking care of myself. And I just think that is present almost every time that we are burned out.
Something you talk about a lot in the book too is the idea of self-awareness and the fact that it's really a matter of, you actually suggest in the book, waking up in the morning and thinking, okay, what is my number today on that scale? What is my number? And actually being honest with ourselves too, because we don't stop to ask ourselves. We just think, okay, am I powering through? Yes. Okay, keep going. So I love that too. And I love the different approaches you have for really considering that and asking ourselves and being honest with ourselves. One of the things too, and we'll have to get into this next time, is I love the whole, the line dance you do about, okay, am I on the left side of the scale? Do you want to go ahead, Eric, and share a little bit about the to the left, to the right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've all been to a wedding reception at some point, and there's the cheesy line dance. And oh, my kids cringe when I talk about this. I mean, cringe, but people remember it. And I've actually had people get up out of their chairs at events that I've done, and they do it. So life moves us towards empty, to the left of the scale. So we go to the left, to the left, to the left. What do we need to do? We got to figure out how to go to the right, to the right, to the right. You know, it's cheesy, but think about it. I mean, if we're empty, we got to figure out how to fill up. And we got to be honest with ourselves about where we're at. If we say we're a 7, but we're really a 2, we're going to act like a 7, and we're going to drain ourselves even more. We have to be honest. It's okay to be where we are. It's not okay to stay there.
I love, and it's so memorable. It just sticks with you, the whole to the left, to the right thing. And I find it particularly funny because I know my boys would actually say, Mom, that is so cringy. Stop.
Yep. That's what they say to me too, but I'm not speaking to them. So it works just fine.
They're not your target market. Okay. One last question, and then I will let you go. Where can people find you, Eric?
Yeah. Home base for me is ericrecker.com. And there's information about coaching, speaking, all of that kind of stuff, links to my books. I have some freebies on there. I have a cool 5-day knockback burnout challenge that if you're feeling like you might be a little burned out, that's a good way to raise your hand. Also added 150 ways to refuel on there as another freebie to grab, because some people don't know how to take care of themselves. But all of that stuff together, just try some little things and see what works for you. And let's turn this table on burnout.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Eric, this has been so much fun. I can't wait to do it again. And we haven't even gotten to your triathlons. We haven't gotten to climbing mountains. You're a pilot. I mean, so many things to cover yet. So, okay, more to come, everyone. Thank you so much, Eric, for being here today. Thanks for your patience with my Wi-Fi challenges. And thanks for being an amazing human. I'm so glad our paths crossed and that you're part of my world now.
Sherry, I couldn't be more thankful. I definitely believe the best is yet to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, and more of Eric to come soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks so much for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, tell your friends, and leave us a review. Follow me on my social media platforms highlighted in the show notes, and get in touch with me at thedashmindset.com. Share the topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. We'll see you next time. Design and differentiate your dash your way and make today amazing.